Jeremy. Well, welcome everybody out there. You know, we've all been chatting preliminary, but it's great. We'll get started now. And this is a wonderful introduction webinar to Jan Booth's End of Life Nurse Coaching Program. And this is in affiliation with the Open Centre and the Art of Dying Institute. And the Open Centre is the largest urban holistic centre in the United States. So it's a wonderful institution. It's very proud to be facilitating Jan's work, which is important at this current time. I'm going to give a quick introduction to Jan herself and her work. I'm going to just read this because I do want to give you a nice full outline of her, because her work is very profound. It has a lot of components. And then Jan will present to you all for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we're just going to open up for a really good Q&A session, which can also just be a shared dialogue forum. So any way you want to do that. But Jeremy and I will be behind the scenes, and if you want to kind of ask your questions as they come up and type them into the chat box, that's great. I'll just be facilitating that at the end, and we'd love you to obviously participate on camera and mic. That would be good, because then Jan can meet you, hear about the work you're doing, and all that good stuff. So Jan Booth is a long-time hospice and palliative care nurse who's now working as a board-certified integrative nurse coach around issues of aging, illness, and dying. Her 30 years of nursing include being a hospice nurse at the bedside, a palliative care nurse in a major medical centre, an employee health and wellness nurse for a large hospice organisation. She's also worked as a health educator, wellness trainer, and wellness programme developer. In her work as an end-of-life nurse coach, she supports people in navigating conscious ageing and serious illness, helps families to talk more openly about end-of-life priorities, and provides health coaching for both professional and personal family caregivers. She serves also as an associate faculty for certification programs through the International Nurse Coach Association, and co-created the course Sacred Journey, Being Present with Aging, Illness and Dying, in the Washington, D.C. area. Her current graduate studies are focused on nursing leadership in the emerging and innovative models of more humane end-of-life care in the US. And with that, I'm going to hand over our webinar to Jan. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrietta and Jeremy. And welcome to all of you. Even if I can't see your faces, I'm imagining all of you in your different spaces and listening to this webinar all together. And I'm grateful for the technology that allows it to happen. So, one thing I look back on as a pivotal time in the evolution of my career as a nurse who works at end of life came after a year or two of being a bedside hospice nurse. And I started to see this pattern of family after family saying, as they are coming into the hospice program, why didn't we know more about this before? Or we would have done things so differently if we knew what we do now. And speaking to regrets that they might have made treatment decisions differently, they might have made life decisions, quality of life decisions differently. So that had a real impact on me, because I saw the number of people who were saying this, and I started to ask what is happening and how we're caring for people with serious illness and coming into the end of life. What is happening that we're not able to speak about death and give people a chance to alter how they're living based on the reality of their dying? So I wanted to work in palliative care in a major cancer center here in the DC area to understand what are the conversations that's happening, that are happening. And I was doing work in the community and community education to try to understand more, how are people approaching the end of their life? How many people are wanting to engage differently with it? How many people are talking in their families about what matters most. And what I've seen over 30 years is that the majority of us are uncomfortable talking about that. And we don't know what to say. We don't know how to have those conversations. And I'm including my healthcare colleagues as well in that. And what I'm also seeing over the past 30 years is a slow shifting, particularly over the last few years, a slow shifting towards a more compassionate, conscious approach to the last part of our life. And I consider this program being a piece of that innovation, that leading forward edge, emerging model of how we might care for each other in the last part of our life, how we might care differently and enter that time of our life differently. So hence the end-of-life nurse coaching program, which is a collaboration between, as you heard, the International Nurse Coach Association, which trains nurses to work from a coaching perspective and become board certified coaches. Collaboration between that organization and the Open Center, which has been a leading voice for many years in death and dying. Some of the best conferences I've ever been to over decades of conferences related to end-of-life, death, dying, illness, aging, all of that. So some of the best conferences have been the ones through the Art of Dying Institute. So keep your eye out for whenever the next one is coming through the Open Center. So regrets. This book by Bronnie Ware called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying became a viral sensation a while back. I guess 2012 is when she published the book. And so I saw this go through social media quite a bit. What is it that those of us who work at end of life have heard over and over again as regrets for people whose time is limited, whose life is limited, and are looking back and saying, I wish that I had such and such. So the reason I think this has been so potent for people, this idea of regrets, is that those of us who are learning from people at the end of life are having a chance to wake up a little bit more to the preciousness of our lives. So you see here, those of you who can see the screen, the 5 that she heard repeatedly. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Another one. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. A third. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And the 5th one, I wish that I had let myself be happier. So there's something that happens when we engage in talking about death and dying and end of life. One thing is that we have the possibility of moving more smoothly through that time in our life and with less of a sense of being blindsided, which is what happens when we don't talk about it until crisis comes. But the second real benefit of being able to talk about mortality and talk about dying and remember that our time here on Earth is completely unknown and unpredictable is that we live differently with that knowledge. We live more fully. And these are, I think, what these regrets speak to. So the starting point that I come from and that this program is coming from is death is not a medical event, a failure, or a problem to be solved. Death is a natural part of the life cycle and holds the possibility of meaning-making and transformation for all of us. Many people come into the last part of their lives feeling unprepared and afraid. And lastly, there is a growing cultural awareness that we need to navigate a more conscious and compassionate approach to care at the end of life. So what's new here in this end-of-life integrative nurse coach program? How is this different from what is out there with other coaching programs and other nurse training programs? I would say this is an innovative response to the crisis of how we die in this country. This is asking nurses to take a different kind of leadership further back in the trajectory of illness, as we say. You know, when someone is living with chronic illness, living as an elder, is living with serious illness, and we know that they're moving towards end of life, that we engage in conversations much earlier about what matters most to people. It's also a collaboration between two forward-thinking organizations. It's an opportunity for nurses to take that different leadership. It's creating a new role that doesn't really exist, this idea of end-of-life nurse coaching, different from hospice and palliative care nursing, different perhaps from a health and wellness coach, but working as collaborators and as colleagues with both of those other roles. But this is a new role that's on what I would consider the leading edge of healthcare and wellbeing. And a key part of this program is self-development, because the nurse, or really this is true for anyone who's working at end of life, my belief is that we are most effective, most honest, most authentic, and most compassionate when we have done our own exploration about our own fears, beliefs, ideas, assumptions, biases about dying, about living with illness, about being diminished, about getting older, and about the pain that we come into contact with when we are grieving, either before someone dies or after they die. And until we really can engage more in our own self-development and self-care, we're limited in how we're going to be able to be compassionately present with other people who are going through the hard work of end of life. So the American Nurses Association came out just recently, in the last month or so, with a position paper, as they call it, on nurse leadership and end of life. And so they said decision-making for the end of a patient's life should occur over years rather than just in the minutes or days before a patient's death. And just in parentheses, for any of you who don't know this, the average median length of time that people are in hospice programs in this country is just over 2 weeks. So all that wonderful support that can be there for a family is coming for a lot of people at the last minute and in a time of crisis. So this kind of decision-making and thinking proactively and really engaging with decision-making needs to occur over years. Nurses can be a resource and support for patients and families. And in that decision-making process, nurses are often rated the number 1 or number 2 most trusted professions. Nurses are seen as accessible, trustworthy, being able to speak the language of medicine and science and translate it into lay language. And so are, for many people, the go-to when you're wanting to understand something in healthcare. Nurses are often ideally positioned to contribute to these conversations about end of life, about care decisions, maintaining a focus on patient preferences, how to establish mechanisms to respect the patient's autonomy, things like advanced directives, making sure that what matters to that person is a care plan that we're all following. So in my mind, this program is drawing from these 3 areas. There's the work of end-of-life care. And end-of-life can, there's no one definition to that. If you're reading someone like Erickson or Jung or some of the people who have studied developmental tasks of being a human being, end of life is that last part of our life. If we're lucky enough to live a long life, it's that last period before we die, which can be months and it can be years. In the sort of typical way we talk about it in the healthcare system, end-of-life care is usually the point where cure is no longer the focus of treatment for a person, and we're moving to palliative care, treating symptoms only. So end-of-life care and the skills that go into being able to be present and to be knowledgeable and to walk with people during that time meets a coaching perspective. And coaching, we'll talk about in a minute, different from the way a lot of us have been trained in healthcare. coaching really is putting the person we're working with, the patient, if it's in the healthcare system, at the center, not what we think should be driving medical decision making. And then the other piece of this is nurses stepping into a different kind of leadership. So this end-of-life nurse coaching program takes place over 6 months and starts in November 9th to 13th. It's a 5-day residential time together, meeting at the Open Center. And then the second part will be in April. And in between is a 5-month independent study, which is when nurses are practicing the coaching skills with clients in the community. They're getting coached by peers, they are coaching peers, and we have monthly supervision phone calls, and there's some written work as well that is happening during that 5-month independent study. So we discussed already this wonderful collaboration between these two organizations, and that these classes are going to be in the New York Open Center. So who are we looking at as people to be a part of this program? Really all nurses who want to make a difference, a positive difference in the lives of people living with chronic advanced illness and at the end of life. But what we're finding is that this might be particularly relevant for nurses who are working in all these different areas here: critical care, certainly nurses in ICU who are seeing and often very frustrated by how confusing treatment decisions are being made, and seeing a lot of really tough stuff with people who haven't thought ahead of time or talked with their families about what matters to them when they're no longer able to breathe on their own. But also nurses working in chronic disease management, oncology, hospice and palliative care, who want to work from a different perspective within hospice and palliative care, long-term care, home care, parish nursing, those nurses who are working within faith communities, community health, nurses who are working in integrative nursing or holistic nursing and are wanting to add a different group of skills. It's 120 hours, the whole program, and that includes the residential time together, the 5 days at the beginning and at the end, and then that 5-month period in the middle. And the 120 hours is what is required in order to sit, if someone were to choose to follow up and sit for board certification as a nurse coach, which is pretty new certification as of a couple of years ago. And this is this 60 hours of experiential learning in these I've been saying 5 day, but it's really 4.5 on-site modules. And you can see the hours there, 9 a.m. to 6. And the last day is a half day. The 60 hours then that makes up the 120 hours is this self-paced supervised coaching practice in between with those monthly supervision calls. So tuition fees, and all of this is on the website. Some of this you all may have seen already. The tuition is $49.95 with a reduction early bird rate, $44.95 if paid by after the 19th. So what are some of the benefits of this? So this program provides all the requirements to go on to be board certified. It also covers the 60 hours required for people who want to move towards their certification in thanatology. Association of Death Education and Counseling has a separate certification. Thanatology is the study of death. You also will be getting continuing education credits for all those hours that we referred to earlier. And something that a lot of people don't focus on when they first sign up for our nurse coach certification programs, but ends up being some of the most important, is this dedicated time during the residential period and focused time in that 5-month independent study where you are focusing on your own health goals, self-renewal, self-development, reflection, making time for it, and giving yourself a focus for it, as well as having your own peer coaches, so free health coaching right there. And also it brings you into the what is now a global network of nurse coaches, a really forward-thinking group of nurses who want to see, who want to bring about the health care that is based on a whole person, that is based on health promotion and prevention of disease, as opposed to the model that we're all working with right now, which is a disease-focused model. So a nurse coach is a nurse or an advanced practice nurse who integrates coaching competencies into any setting or specialty area of practice to facilitate a process of change or development that helps individuals or groups to realize their potential. That's a mouthful, right? So this is the way a lot of us as nurses, again, I'm not sure how many of you are seeing the screen, but it's a little cartoon of a nurse, and she's saying, I have the solution to all of your health problems. And at the bottom it says, all you have to do is change everything about the way you live. So that's the way we've been doing for a number of years. We've been doing health education and health promotion within the healthcare system and out in the community. And that is this idea that if we just give enough information and education, then people will make the changes they need to be healthier people. And so, you know, you think about yourself and how hard it is to hold fast to your own health habits of eating healthfully and getting enough sleep and moving your body and being physically fit and making time for fun and making time for the relationships in your life, and, you know, can go on and on. So we all know how hard it is to focus on that and commit to it and to make changes that last. If it was just a matter of education, we all would be fantastically healthy. So clearly something else needs to be happening. And what we're finding through coaching is that the coaching perspective brings the focus on what matters most to you and what you want to change right now in your own readiness to change, and helps to put a plan in place with very clear steps so that when you leave a coaching session, you know what that one step you're going to be doing on that day and what you're going to be doing the next day that is manageable and doable and is part of a goal for moving forward. So that's the typical, you know, health coaching perspective. And we're using it a little bit differently in end-of-life coaching, which we'll talk about. But so as nurses, and certainly this is true for a lot of other people who are healthcare professionals, you know, we've been taught how to teach and to provide counseling and advising and advocating, all important parts of our role. But this coaching is different because this is where the client takes the lead, the patient takes the lead, not me. I don't walk into the room as the nurse and say, okay, we looked at your weight and your blood pressure and you've got to lose weight and stop smoking, and here's the education and here's a class you can go to, and that's the end of it. So the client is the one taking the lead. And it's a mode, the relationship between the coach and the person being coached is one of support, exploration, curiosity, as opposed to judgment and more directive care. So it's collaborative, not directive. It's time limited. It's saying, let's set a goal and between here and there, and this is what we're going to work towards so that we know when we get there and we know there's some boundaries to this work we're going to do together. And it also, importantly, builds on our own strengths, not on where we're failing and falling down, because that's usually where most of us approach goals around health and well-being. We beat ourselves up about, yeah, I tried that, I haven't been able to do that. We look at all the things we're not doing or we don't feel we have the will to do, instead of saying, well, wait a minute, where do I have strengths? Where's my resilience? Because we all do. And let's build on that and what's already working, and let's build on my readiness to make changes. So it's the shift from the compliance directive mode that most of us engage with in the healthcare system to one of collaboration. So that's the coaching perspective, and those are the skills that we're bringing into the work we're doing with people who are living with serious illness and moving into end of life. So some of those skills: active listening, open-ended questions to encourage exploration and talking, as opposed to yes and no answers, something called motivational interviewing. Some of you may be familiar with that, which is a whole way of working with people to work through ambivalence. When most of us are thinking of making changes or wanting to focus on better well-being, we have some ambivalence, or else we'd already be doing it, right? There's part of us that says, I want to do this differently. It would be better for me. I would have more peace of mind. I would feel healthier, have more energy. But, and it's that but, and that ambivalence that is at the heart of the skills of motivational interviewing. So how do we listen to how people are talking about change and help them to move through that ambivalence? Appreciative inquiry is a whole other area that builds on strengths and resilience. What's already working? Positive psychology, relatively new to the world of psychology, based on the idea that instead of just studying psychopathology, all the things that can go wrong with our psychology and our mental health. Instead saying, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? What does it mean to be spiritually healthy? To be emotionally healthy? And let's learn about that as well. We study behavioral science, how do people change? We look at human development, what is normative for different parts of your life. So for example, when we're working with someone who is an elder, or we're working with someone who is experiencing diminishment as the disease process is picking up more speed and they're moving more towards end of life, we know that certain things are developmental, and there are tasks, in a sense, that we are meant to move through that are very normal parts of being a human being. And there are developmentally normal parts of moving into the last part of our life. And to be able to talk about that in a way that helps people to see the possibilities, not just the grief and the loss and pain that's involved in conversations about end of life, and acknowledging that someone is dying, but also the possibilities for transformation, for connection, for healing of relationships, for a deeper spiritual understanding about what it means to be human. Legacy and the passing on of legacy to the next generation. We also draw from mindfulness studies. What do we know about the impact of mindfulness exercises, meditation, prayer on the brain and on the stress response? And we're focusing on this idea of well-being. So wellness, when you think health and wellness, well, how does that come together with someone who is diminishing, not bouncing back from something? Well, this concept of well-being, that it's possible throughout the life spectrum, that it's possible to be dying and to have a sense of well-being. And then again, as we said earlier, we're really focusing also on the nurse coach's self-development. So as a nurse coach who specializes in end-of-life care, here are some things you could do with this training. Start your own coaching practice. Use these coaching skills to expand your current work wherever you're working. Integrate this coaching throughout the trajectory of illness, wherever you're meeting patients, to be able to bring that coaching into helping someone know more clearly what's important to them, and you supporting them to have that happen. Bring the coaching lens into hospice and palliative care, working with caregivers there who are struggling with compassion fatigue or maybe even burnout. Serve as an internal coach within the healthcare system. Focus your coaching on professional and personal caregivers. Contribute your skills to end-of-life advocacy and policy work. And this is just a beginning. There's a longer conversation there about the possibilities when you have a new role. The possibilities are limitless in what you can do with this work. So why are we focusing on end-of-life care? Why are we choosing to collaborate with the Art of Dying Institute? Normally, our coaching certification programs for nurses are focused on health and wellness coaching and end-of-life coaching. So why are we focusing here on end-of-life care? So the Institute of Medicine had this landmark report that came out in 2014 where they told us what a lot of us already knew, which is we're making this a lot harder than it needs to be. We're really increasing the suffering around dying, the way that we're doing dying right now. And so they said three things. We need to create systems at end of life that are integrated, that are patient-centered, and are family-oriented. They're not medically driven. We need to consider the evolving physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs of individuals all throughout the trajectory of illness. And we need to create care and care plans and treatment options that are consistent with individuals' values, goals, and informed preferences. So they need to know what the options are. They need to be able to make these decisions based on their own values and goals. And what a lot of us see happening in healthcare system when people are getting sicker and getting closer to dying, that if you haven't had these conversations and talked about these things beforehand, that's a really hard time to start doing that kind of reflection. And most people are exhausted cognitively, may not be able to be thinking that clearly. So these conversations really need to happen a lot further back. So many of us nurses have been witness to advanced illness and dying, not always happening in good ways, see a lot of suffering, and know that things could be different. There's new thinking, there is a new wave of innovation, and what some people refer to as a tipping point, and opening the conversation about death and dying in our culture. Some of it with the large number of baby boomers who are moving into the last third of our lives. We've also witnessed our parents dying, living longer and longer, living with dementias, living with illnesses, and have learned a lot about, in a sense, how hard it is to die in this day and age. So boomers are driving some of that new interest in opening up this conversation. And there seems to be a shortage of end-of-life skills among healthcare practitioners. It really takes reflection, discernment, and high-level communication skills to have the difficult conversations and complex conversations with patients and families about choices at end of life. And if we're going to have a conversation that's different from do what you need to so I don't die, the medical imperative is often not dying. So we're going to do treatment and have care plans based on not dying. Well, what if we were to have a care plan and decision making that's based instead on the things that matter most to patients and families? That is a high level conversation. Those are skills that a lot of people don't have. So this program is one way of contributing some of those high level skills to nurses and developing their skills. And we are highly trusted people at the bedside in a more intimate relationship over sometimes many years of relationship with patients and families, and have an opportunity to open up that conversation. So this innovation and reform has been happening really in this country since the 1960s, when the first wave of hospice came in. The first hospice was founded by a nurse up in Connecticut. And the second wave was when palliative care, which grew out of hospice, palliative care became more available in many hospital systems throughout the country. And this third wave of innovation that we're seeing now is coming in some really interesting ways around how we have conversations. So things like death cafes. Some of you listening may have gone to one, and if you haven't, I really encourage it wherever you are in your community. Many communities are holding them now. If you go to deathcafe.org, and you can see where they're being held. So this is one of many new innovations that are bringing the conversation about dying right into the heart of the community, into cafes, strangers coming together to talk about dying and death. There's also innovations around care at the bedside. So a new role of death doulas. There have been birth doulas in the past that are accompanying women in the process of labor and giving birth, different from a midwife. And now there are roles, in fact, there's training at the Oakland Center in the role of a death doula. It tend to be, sometimes it's people with a medical or rather healthcare background, but often they're lay people. And they're also an example of innovation in after-death care is a growing interest in bringing the care of people who have died back into the home and into the community. So training of death midwives and people who are supporting families who want to do what we in this country did not so long ago. My grandparents, when they died in their home in Maine, they were laid out and they stayed there for 2 or 3 days as the community came in and had that early grieving process together of telling stories like a wake, like an Irish wake or like sitting Shiva, where we have many of these human rituals that in this modern day and age in this country, in this time, we've lost touch with. So fascinating things are happening to help bring the conversation, not only to open the conversation, but to bring the role of dying more central to our lives. One of the things that's happened with the increase in the technological medicalizing of dying is that many people are growing up now in this country without really seeing aging close up, without really seeing sick people close up, and not seeing dying people close up. Often our families are not together intergenerationally as we were in the past. And so aging person is often in one place like a nursing home, a sick person is in the hospital, dying people are either in a hospice unit or dying in the hospital, and sometimes at home. So how we die now has become, in a sense, more marginalized. So a lot of these innovations are about how do we bring death back into the center of humanity, our community. How do we, in seeing other people diminished, getting older and dying, how does that not only change how we care for those people, but how does it change how I think about myself and my own life? So big things have changed in our country. You can see here, 1920, 75% of Americans died at home. And in 2014, most people were dying in hospitals and long-term care facilities. Also, how we die has changed, which is why we're having the conversation we're having, is that we're having to relearn what it means to allow natural death, because we've been able to, in many ways, hold off dying, for better or worse. And so we are correcting the course, in a sense, readjusting back to what would it look like when a body is trying to die to allow a body to. Before 1974, most people died of sudden death. And the reality now, if we are lucky enough to live longer and not die as a young person, we are going to die slow deaths over periods of time. And most of us, 70% of us, are going to die from disease. Average life expectancy has doubled over the past 100 years. And the American family, you all know from your own lives, it's an unusual family that still live near each other. So here are some realities. Also, 80% of Americans say they want to die at home, but only 21% do. So what's happening? Where are these conversations falling short? Only 20 to 30% of Americans have advance directives, which are so important in being able to lay out the care you want when you're no longer able to speak for yourself. Who's going to speak for you, and when and how do you want to either have life-saving measures or be able to allow natural death. And the other important statistic is that out of the people who did complete advance directives, which include the two parts, your living will, what you want or don't want done if you're living with life-limiting illness, and the second part is who will speak for me the medical power of attorney if I'm not able to speak for myself? Well, it turns out that only a quarter of physicians even knew that their patients had advance directives on file. We already talked about the very relatively short amount of time people are in hospice services. And we also have seen from research studies again and again that people who talk with their families and healthcare providers about what matters to them and what their preferences are for end-of-life care have less fear and anxiety and more able to influence and direct their medical care, which not only contributes to their own well-being at the end of life, but it also impacts the experience of the family going through that death and the experience of grieving afterwards. Healthcare team had a better understanding of their wishes, so one of the issues in modern times is we don't know when we start dying, and that's one of the reasons why these conversations are so hard to have. When do we go from living with serious illness to dying from serious illness? And that transition. One of the reasons that so much of, I think someone just came off of mute maybe. I don't know if someone just noticed it, just double check your mute. There we go. It's not always clear, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of these conversations are happening more at the last moment, is because there are two different trajectories in modern medical care. If I'm living with a serious illness and I'm treating and I'm going for cure as opposed to I'm dying from a serious illness. So it's hard to know when we're starting to die. When do we have these conversations? And what I'm trying to share here is a different idea of what a conversation about living and dying looks like and how helpful it can be when we start much earlier in the life of a person and in the disease process of a person and talking about what matters. So it's one of my favorite quotes here from, I would say, a real forward-thinking, fresh-thinking person in the end-of-life world, sometimes controversial in some of the things he says, but to me he's really worth knowing about and listening to. Stephen Jenkinson, this is one of his books called Die Wise. He says, dying well is the unthinkable thought in a culture that doesn't believe in dying, and it will take about as much courage and wisdom as you can manage to do it. Dying well is a life's work. I love that last line. Dying well is a life's work. So to me, this complete interweaving of living well and dying well, and I'm aware that those are loaded terms because there's judgment about what's a good death and not a good death, but those are sort of the best words I can come up with a sense of living with a sense of well-being, dying with a sense of well-being, a sense of completion, a sense of you're dying not just being for you, but being for the people that come behind you. As we learn about what it means to be human, we learn from the people who are going ahead of us. So, talking about dying, having the end in mind changes how we live. And another part of this new model of end-of-life care is to say this decision-making is going to be based on what matters most to the person, not on the imperative of not dying. So some of that involves normalizing these conversations. You know, when any of you who are on the call who work in end-of-life care, you know that when people ask what you do, you know, in social settings, there's usually two reactions to hearing you work for hospice or working in end-of-life care. You know, either there's a kind of glaze over like, oh, I'm not going there. You know, it's not a conversation I want to have, and someone walks away. But for other people, you become a place, because there's so few places to have these conversations, you become a safe place to talk about these things. And that's one of the reasons why I think, you know, projects like death cafes and these wonderful conversation starters that you can download off the internet. One of my favorites is Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner. It's a whole downloadable plan for interesting questions and conversations you can have with your friends or with strangers around a dinner table. It's all about how do we relearn, or maybe learn for the first time, I don't know. But how do we relearn and normalize these conversations that focus on well-being? So well-being, when I use that word, general term for the condition of an individual or group in their social, economic, psychological, spiritual, or medical state. And here's the important part, well-being, based on the idea that the way each person thinks and feels about her or his life is meaningful and important. And how do we know that if we don't ask? So here's one story of modern dying. And here's another story of modern dying. How do we help put a plan in place based on what matters most to people? A goal without a plan is just a wish. So this coaching process is what is helping us to give parameters and words and roots to what matters to someone. What's the goal for care? What's the goal for treatment? What's the goal for how I'm going to spend these last days, weeks, months of my life? Because without a plan and without some way to prepare as much as we can prepare, it's going to stay a wish, because one of the troubles, and I'm beating a dead horse here, but one of the troubles in our current system is that the default mode, if we don't have another plan, the default mode in modern medical care is to stop you from dying. So through the coaching relationship, which involves trust and mutual respect, the integrative nurse coach and the client or the patient are engaged in a way that allows for a shift in consciousness and an exploration of life's journey, health, and well-being goals, and the possibility of transformation. Now that's the big picture, and we break it down into some very concrete ways throughout that coaching. So an important piece, I keep referring to the self-development, the development and the care of the nurse. Nurses typically nurturing people, very good at taking care of others, and not so good taking care of themselves. And one of the problems that can come over time working in these intense situations around a lot of difficult emotions, the witness to people suffering over and over again are these themes of compassion, fatigue, and burnout. So self-care, how we care for ourselves really matters. And the emphasis on this within the 6-month coaching program can be transformative for many nurses who have been on the edge of burnout, who have been, from a health point of view, whole person health have really been struggling. It also can be very helpful for the nurse to explore, well, what matters to me? So what are my own wishes? Have I done my brain record? Have I spoken with my family? What are my own fears? And what are the conversations I need to have if I myself am living with a significant illness? Or what are the conversations within my family of origin that I need to have? This self-development throughout this 6-month program is also really helpful for nurses to put feet and to put meat on what they're hoping for in moving forward with the nursing. Because many people coming to this program are coming because they're burned out on their own system, they're burned out on wherever they were working, they're burned out on working in a fast-paced, depersonalized, technology-driven healthcare that makes very little time for the things that most of us went into healthcare for, into nursing for, into medicine, into social work, into chaplaincy, and that is time to be together, human to human, time to be able to sit in silence, time to be able to be compassionately present with another human being. So we do this self-development through a lot of reflective work, through practices, awareness practices, health practices, coaching goals through the personal coaching. And Robert Thurman, who has taught a lot at Open Center, I know I've seen him there numerous times over the years, a Buddhist scholar, American Buddhist scholar. One of my favorite quotes is from him. He says, "As living human beings, the most rewarding purpose of our lives is to awaken to our deepest reality, to unfold our most powerful energies of love and compassion. The study of and the preparation for death may be the greatest opportunity towards learning to live a full life. And that's, if there's one piece of information that I wish I could get out to people about why it matters to engage with immortality and engage with talking about dying, it's the impact it has on changing how we're living. You know, either any of you yourselves, if you've had a health scare, a serious illness, someone close to you has had, you know, people often talk about, as hard as it was one of the most important things that happened to them because it woke them up from this slumber of believing that I just have all the time in the world. And it sharpens, intensifies, focuses, what do I want to do in the time that I have? And that's just as important to any of us who are living healthfully, any of us who have the, what might be an illusion, but have the idea that we have years left. And it's just as important to someone who no agrees. What matters today, and how can we help to have that happen? How can we together collaborate? How can I support you to have to know what matters to you, to attach it to some kind of a goal that has steps to it, that we can manifest that, help it to happen. So let me stop there. That's about 45 minutes, and I think that's plenty of me talking kind of big picture with some concrete specifics here, but also talking big picture here, and end with, for those of you who can see the screen, these are links to, if you're interested or you want to send this information to someone who you think, oh, that would be perfect for so-and-so, you know, a nurse who is really looking to do something different, who wants to practice differently, who wants to engage and make a difference with people who are living with advanced illness and end of life. These would be good links to send. One is a registration link through the International Nurse Coach Association. That's the first one there that says iNurseCoach.com and the letters. There's more information as well there, even if it's not for registration. There also, the last link there is to the Open Center's webpage on end-of-life nurse coaching program. So you can get at it either way, but the registration is only through the Nurse Coach, which is the International Nurse Coach Association. And please share with friends, colleagues, nurses who would be interested in this program, but also any of you who are not nurses who are on this call, but just are wanting to know what are some of the things that are happening and that are helping to shape how we care for people who are very ill and dying. Just to know about it may be a good thing, may be enough there, or you may also be thinking of people who would be interested in it. So please send the information on. And what I'd love to do now is to open up to any questions. They may be coming through Jeremy and Henrietta versus chat and any messages that have been sent, or it may be that Jeremy can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself, and Jeremy will, and Henrietta will let you know how that works. But I would love to hear from you all. What drew you to wanting to be here at this intro to this program? What are you reflecting on in hearing this? What questions might you have, either very specific questions or kind of bigger picture questions? Or is there something you want to share that has nothing to do with any of that, that has to do with how we can together find a more humane way, a human-making way of living the last part of our lives together?
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jan, thank you so much for that. It was extremely informative. I made so many notes, as I'm sure all of us did. And Jane has requested, she said, please can we make sure we get a copy of this presentation. It was so good. So just to assure you all out there that we will be sending you the recorded version.
Can you hear me? This is Jane.
Yeah, hi, Jane.
Oh,
Great.
hi. Yeah, I work with the NYU School of Medicine psychiatric department and work with the team that did the end-of-life anxiety studies.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you. I'm so moved that you're moving the conversation into a formalized way of how we can work with people rather than like a small study somewhere. So this is very fascinating to me. I'm excited about it, and I want to know that the link is going to be available, and I see that there's all these great next steps. I'm going to pass it on to people, including my former nursing programs and things like that. But it's a big, broad topic. But thank you very much for your work in this. I'm very moved by it.
Thank you, Jane.
Hi, this is Ralph.
Hi, Ralph.
Hi, I also want to thank you very much for the presentation, for just your work in this field. And as I said earlier, I'm have chosen to go into this field and I'm actually interviewing for the first time on Friday with as a case manager for a home hospice organization here in New Jersey. And these are the kind of conversations in the care planning, I guess, that I can see that taking a coaching approach, can be very helpful. One of the things I wanted to clarify in the program is that the designation of a nurse coach is generic. It's not specific to the end of life.
Correct.
And the board certification, though, is specific towards end of life.
Yeah, no, it's not. Thank you for that clarification, because that's important. One of the wonderful things about this collaboration is that although the focus is on end of life, and when I say that, I'm including chronic advanced illness and up through the dying process. The training that you're getting as a nurse coach can be used anywhere. In fact, you may well be working with caregivers, either personal family caregivers or professional caregivers like nurses and physicians and social workers who are focusing on health goals, who are healthy people focusing on health goals. So the coaching skills you're getting, the integrative nurse coaching skills that allow you then to be able to sit for the board certification, if you chose to do that, are general coaching skills that can be applied anywhere. So in theory, someone could go through this program, even though it has an end-of-life focus, and they might choose to only have part of their focus be end-of-life, and they're working primarily with people who have fitness and health goals and life balance goals and things like that, which are more typical for coaching. And the other thing I want to say, just Ralph, and makes me think of with your question, is that when you go through this program, you have a certificate that allows you to call yourself a nurse coach. A coach and a nurse is a nurse coach. It's a confusing term. Some people think that nurse coach means it's you're only coaching nurses, but it's a nurse who is working from a coaching perspective. And after this program, with your certificate and the proof of that, you can call yourself a nurse coach. The only thing you can't call yourself until you do the board certification is board certified.
So the board certification is for a nurse coach. It is not specific.
There is no end of life. Now, some people want to have that additional, maybe someone who is really wanting to make more of a career change to work in end of life, or for whatever reason, want to have that ADEC certification, which is the Association of Death Education and Counseling. And that is specific to any healthcare person, counseling, pastoral care, social work, nurse, anyone, physician, can sit for that ADEC credential. But the board certification for a nurse coach you will have all the information, you will have all the coaching skills, you'll have all the background, the theory, and the practice to be able to work with anyone from a coaching perspective.
And I have one other question. During the 6-month independent study in between, how do we either find, I don't know what you call them, clients or people that we're working with, and within the context, if I do get this job, would I have to get permission from my company to use the coaching with people, within my job context? Would I have to go outside of that to find people to coach?
Yeah, good questions. You could do either. Generally, what people find is that if they're going to be, you can use the coaching skills anywhere. You can use them with your friends and family and out in the community. Mm-hmm. But for the coaching, the 6 clients that you're going to be working with, 4 sessions with 6 clients, if you're going to be writing them up as part of your transcript and part of your certification hours, then you would want to be clear in your workplace that this is what you're doing, because you would have the client fill out a coaching agreement and some other things like that, and you would be recording some of the coaching sessions. But just using your coaching skills anywhere you want, you don't have to ask permission. This is part of this comes under the license of being a nurse. It's just that most of us in nursing training and education and practice have not learned to work from this perspective. And the first part of your question, which is a good one also, where do we get our clients? You can use people at work, you can use people in the community, you can use friends and family. That has its own, that's a whole other conversation. Sometimes that's a little tricky to be able to separate out coaching from your relationship with that person. But it's doable. But what a lot of people do is will offer free coaching to colleagues at work. They'll maybe go to a women's center, go to a shelter, go to a gym, go to an integrative health practice, chiropractor, osteopath, people who are likely to be open to a coach working with their clients and offer this free coaching.
I see. Thank you.
Free coaching is kind of a nice combination of words.
Yeah, and Jan, I was going to say to you that those links that you put up there, we'll also email them to everybody.
Excellent.
So that Jane, for instance, because she wanted to send it out to the people she was working with currently at NYU, just to spread the word.
That would be great. And I know that this is 45 minutes of the recorded part of what I spoke of earlier, or the full 2 hours is a lot for people to listen to. There is, if someone just has a little bit of time to listen, there's on both of the sites, there is a 3.5 minute video that describes the program. And
that's right, I watched that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. But I was also thinking, because this is a free webinar recorded, it would be great to send it out to anyone that's interested to know further. We can have that as a resource at the Open Centre.
Yes, thank you. That's wonderful that that's part of this. The more people we can reach, timing for so many things in our lives, timing is an essential piece of it. We may have the desire, but it may not be the right time. So
that's right.
So send it to people and let them make their own decisions about whether it's right for them. But anyone who you think would be interested, get the word out. It's really speaking to nurses to be able to work differently and have more confidence to work from this point of view. It's more creative, and it's also for some people helping them to think differently about the next phase of their nursing. Clear was.
I was just saying goodbye to Jane. She has to leave. She said, left us with the words carpe diem.
I have to go too. Thank you again,
Yes,
Jan.
and good luck.
Very interested in the program, and I'll be in touch.
Wonderful.
Further.
Let me know, and certainly I can send out my email as well if anyone wants to contact me and ask more questions. I'm happy to do that. And Ralph, did you say you have an interview on Friday?
Yes, with this home hospice.
Yes, good luck.
Company. Thank you. Thank you. This has definitely given me things to think about and do some research and preparation. It's been a good
wonderful
good thought and giving me some more things that have focused why I want to go into this field in the first place. So, thank you.
That's wonderful. You bet. Thanks for